Welcome to the SAFeTY Chronicles, exploring how to keep people and pets safe from the cycle of interpersonal violence. I am your host, Allie Phillips, founder and CEO of Sheltering Animals and Families Together, the SAFeTY Program, a nonprofit organization working with domestic violence shelters to eliminate the pet housing barrier to safety. As the founder, I have led the global movement in helping domestic violence shelters create on-site pet housing while elevating the criminal justice response to how animal abuse links to crimes against people. I am a former prosecuting attorney, internationally recognized legal expert and public speaker, award-winning author, and advocate for protecting vulnerable victims. In this podcast, we will explore how and why animals are harmed in the cycle of family violence and the human-animal bond that keeps victims in harm's way with their pets. Guest speakers and I will share strategies for shelters and professionals working to safeguard survivors, why pet-inclusive sheltering is life-saving, and safety tips for those who need help. None of the content will be graphic. If you are in harm's way, please contact your nearest domestic violence shelter or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. So while the title of this topic may seem like it is a difficult topic to listen to, it really isn't. And it's a very important topic for all of us to be aware of. Regardless of what your work is, this is just something that is very important. And it is about reframing animal abuse as coercive control in domestic violence incidents. Research studies and laws that recognize the link between violence to animals and people continues to grow. It is an evolving industry as more frontline professionals become what we call link informed, the link between violence to animals and violence to people. One recent trend that is happening is the recognition of animal abuse as coercive control in domestic violence incidents. It is a recognition of the oppression of women, oppression of children, and animals, and the connection of harm that comes to them. There is a growth in laws that define animal abuse within domestic violence as a form of coercive control. I want to tell you what states actually have these laws, so please pay attention in case if you live in one of these states. Now, these laws are defined in different ways, okay? So they are a mix of animal abuse being a form of domestic violence, of which these are the states. We have 12 states plus DC that have laws recognizing animal abuse as a form of domestic violence. So those states are Arkansas, Arizona, Alaska, Colorado, Delaware, Indiana, Kentucky, Nebraska, Nevada, Utah, Vermont, Washington, and the District of Columbia. We have states that have defined animal abuse as a form of stalking, and that is in 3 states: Maine, Mississippi, and Missouri. We have 8 states that have defined animal abuse specifically as coercive control. Those states are Colorado, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Oregon, and Washington. And Mississippi and Texas had labeled fear for your property, which includes animals. Animals are defined as property under the law in all the states. So Mississippi and Texas have labeled fear of your property as a form of domestic violence or stalking. Even the United Kingdom and Australia have laws that define coercive control as harming or threatening animals in order to coerce a person. So what is coercive control? It is a pattern of behavior intended to intimidate, harass, or control in a manner that isolates the victim or controls what the victim can or cannot do. Coercive control of an animal focuses on threats and actual harm to a companion animal as intimidation and manipulation of the person in order to silence the person, control the person, and gain compliance regarding the abuse. So, for example, Massachusetts defines their coercive control statute as a pattern of behavior intended to threaten, intimidate, harass, isolate, control, coerce, or compel compliance of a family or household member that causes that family or household member to reasonably fear physical harm or have a reduced sense of physical safety or autonomy, including but not limited to threatening to commit cruelty or abuse to an animal connected to that family or household member. Research studies have found that upwards of 86% of domestic violence victims experience animal abuse. A strong human-animal bond can actually increase the rates of animal abuse by an abuser. It is that exploitation of the bond that actually heightens the rate of animal abuse in a home, because the abuser knows that going after that bond, going after the animal, is a way to coercively control the human. So studies have been and are still focusing on the oppression of women, children, and animals by men, and animals being viewed as property and less than, and how that relates to coercive control and incidents. So animal abuse is an added tool in the abuser's arsenal of isolation and control. Let me say that again. Animal abuse is an added tool in the abuser's arsenal of isolation and control. That is really important to remember. And we know this from numerous studies telling us that a female victim of domestic violence will stay with an abuser or delay leaving out of fear for their companion animals. So as the research field in this area continues to expand and upgrade, legislatures are recognizing that animals need to be recognized as victims of domestic violence, not simply victims of animal abuse. Every state has animal abuse laws on the books. This is a recognition of animals as victims of domestic violence because the animal abuse is linked and wrapped up in the domestic violence control cycle. Because going after the animals and harming them or threatening them in the cycle of domestic violence is a coercive control aspect. And I, as a former prosecutor, I am thrilled to see that legislatures are recognizing this and that we have increasing research addressing this precise topic. Because domestic violence doesn't just happen to people. It happens to everyone in the home. And that includes animals. And when the human-animal bond is strong, it can be exploited and targeted by an abuser, and that is coercive control. It is the exploitation of the attachment that is helping the victim to stay alive, because we know, for those of you who have pets, we love our pets. We will do anything to help them. We see it during natural disasters, during forest fires and hurricanes and tornadoes, where people will not evacuate unless they can take their pet with them. That is the beauty of the human-animal bond, and that is what these abusers exploit so that they can gain control over the human victim. I've always said, and I have said this hundreds of times in all the trainings that I've provided, that the underlying message of an abuser who goes after animals is this: if I can kill the dog, I can kill you. And that is coercive control. So while there are different levels of animal neglect and animal abuse that link to domestic violence, it is the abusers who intentionally, with forethought, target an animal that are the scariest and most dangerous offenders, because it is done with premeditation to create fear in the humans. The FBI has studied this. Law enforcement studies this. Prosecutors need to be aware of this, as do judges, so that it can be addressed appropriately in the courtroom. Because gone are the days of, it's just an animal. We have bigger cases to prosecute. Gone are those days. And if you are working for a law enforcement agency, a prosecution agency, working for a judge, or working for any professional who works with domestic violence survivors, if that is the prevalent belief system, that needs to change, because the research has proven that we can no longer dismiss this. We can no longer just look at animal abuse within the domestic violence context as it's just an animal. It's coercive control. And these are the scariest, most dangerous offenders. So what can you do? What can you do? If you suspect that someone is a victim of domestic violence and they have a pet, be present in their life. Be available to be a listening ear and to help when needed. Have resources available to them. Make sure you are aware of our website, SAFeTProgram.org, and you are aware of the resources on our website as well as the shelter listing. Know what domestic violence shelters are pet friendly in your community or where the closest one is. Number two, if you work in a profession where you encounter victims of domestic violence or victims of animal abuse, recognize that animals can be targeted to control and intimidate adult and child victims. Get yourself up to date on the research. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to give a presentation to your agency, your organization. I teach all over the country and frankly, all over the world. And I can get you in touch with the research on this. And then number three, make sure that your community has a pet-inclusive domestic violence shelter. That's where we come in. As the originator of the pet-inclusive domestic violence shelter movement, reach out to us. We will help. We wrote literally the manual for the domestic violence shelters on how to do this, and we are here to help every step of the way. Okay, so if you know somebody who is working in a profession where they are encountering victims of violence, please share this podcast with them. We would appreciate it, because the more professionals that we have who are link informed and understand that animal abuse is coercive control, the safer our communities will be. All right, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, like this podcast, and share it. We appreciate you. If you are in harm's way and need help, please visit the Pet Inclusive Shelter listing at SAFeTYProgram.org, call your nearest domestic violence shelter, or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Want to support our efforts and help us keep the SAFeTY Startup Manual free for domestic violence shelters? Consider donating at SAFeTYProgram.org/donate. Your donation saves lives.